Welcome to YCN News' presentation of the New Hampshire Senate debate in District 8. We're coming to you from the Library Arts Center in Newport, New Hampshire. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to have a special thanks to Kate Leopold and the Library Arts Center. And you know, one of the best things about having the debate here is you get a chance to see all the art while you're setting up. So if you haven't come down to see the art here, please do. Now, our panelists. From WNTK, Kate Hedrington. Kate, thanks so much. Gail, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Gail.
That's all right.
And from YCN News, Lisa Cannell. Lisa, I got your name right at least. And now our candidates. Jerry Little and Linda Tanner. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
My pleasure.
We drew at random who would be speaking first, and Linda, it's your honor.
Thank you. Thank you. I am currently a state representative for Sullivan County, and I live in Georges Mills. And to tell you a little bit about myself, I was a teacher at Kearsarge Regional High School. For 35 years, I taught phys ed, health, and I coached most of the girls' sports at one time or another. After the 2010 election, when the right-wing Republican supermajority took over the House, I was very concerned at what I was hearing in the newspapers, on TV, about what was happening down at our State House and how the direction in which New Hampshire was going. They were voting to eliminate kindergarten. They voted to eliminate the CHINS petition, Children in Need of Services. They defunded Planned Parenthood. They blocked the health care exchange for the Affordable Care Act as much as they could and blocked the expansion of Medicaid. And so I decided I had to be part of the solution. And as proudly, I served in the Democratic majority in the House in the last 2 years. We passed the first bipartisan budget in decades. We settled lawsuits that had come from the O'Brien budget. We refunded different social services like the Children's in Needs of Services. We passed protections for victims of domestic violence like the Joshua's Law. And when Senator Odell said he was going to retire from his position, I was urged by fellow citizens and also by colleagues in the State House to run for this position. And I feel honored to have the opportunity to run, to actually bring forward some legislation that passed in the House that lost in the Senate by 1 or 2 votes. One of them was the minimum wage. I want to be the person to represent the people of Sullivan County and extend it to the other 24 towns in this district, and I want to bring my problem-solving, common-sense approach. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Jerry?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Yankee Cable News Network, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you to the audience that showed up here tonight. It's very nice of you to come out and to hear this debate. Your interest in the democratic process is very admirable, so thank you all for coming out to see us. I am Jerry Little. I am a lifelong New Hampshire native. I'm a 9th generation New Hampshire native. I was born in Concord in 1955 and met my high school sweetheart in 1972, I think it was, honey, at Concord High School, and we've been together ever since. I am a father. I'm a grandfather. I have a 10-month-old grandson who is just so much fun to be with. By background, you know, when I got out of UNH in 1977, I graduated into a recession also. And I worked some minimum wage jobs. And then I worked for nothing. I decided that when it was time to get my career online, I would take an internship. And following a 6-month internship, I was then able to get promoted back into a minimum wage job. That's the way that those sorts of things happened back then. I swept floors, I worked degreasing tanks, I did whatever I needed to get things online. And things worked out. And I became a reporter in Concord. And when I was covering things like City Hall and planning board meetings, I gained a great respect and appreciation for the community service that people were putting in on behalf of their fellow citizens. So I started getting involved, and I served on the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. Now that I moved to Ware about 10 years ago, I went into City Hall and I said, I'm here, let me know what I can do. And inside of 2 months, I was serving on the Town Finance Committee, and I did my limit of terms there. And then I was town moderator for a couple of terms. And now on the Capital Improvements Projects Committee, I've served on the Agriculture Committee, and I'm also chair of the Public Library Foundation. I'm running because I believe in public service, and I want to be the person that helps the people of District 8 move forward to get a stronger economy, to get us all back to work.
Thank you. And now questions from our panelists. Gail, I got your name wrong at the beginning, but I won't forget it again, so I'll start with you.
Hi, thank you guys for coming here. Look forward to this. New Hampshire has, this is for Jerry. I'm going to ask you first and then Linda.
Very good.
Okay. New Hampshire has one of the highest energy costs in the U.S. It's 17.3 cents per kilowatt. That's before the projected increase that's coming. We also have one of the highest business taxes in New Hampshire. I mean, in the nation. I believe it's number 3. The electrical rates affect consumers, but the electrical rates also affect businesses as well as the tax. What would you do about the high energy rates?
You've put your finger right immediately on one of the biggest issues that I believe that we're facing. I've knocked on over 1,200 doors across District 8 since the 1st of July. When I talk to individuals, they say what we need are better jobs, better, good-paying jobs. When I talk to businesses, they say, I'd love to start building and I'd love to start creating more jobs, but we have problems. They talk about healthcare costs, they talk about taxes, but mainly they talk about energy. What businesses hate is unpredictability. We saw the spike in rates last February. We need to get our energy rates under control. We're living underneath the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in New Hampshire, and its intent is to push fossil fuel out of the energy mix. But what we don't have is a great plan to come in behind it. Certainly we can make up for some of the loss of energy with conservation, but what we need to do are to get more sources of energy coming into renewable energy, coming into ISO New England, our power grid in this area. We need to build that bigger pipeline to get more natural gas coming in here. We have to get people to sit down and talk about how are we going to get hydropower from Quebec here, and how are we going to get proper siting of wind power. And we need to figure out ways that we can encourage greater use of solar. And we have a wonderful biofuel wood chip products right here in New Hampshire that we can be making more use of. I think we have a lot of sources of energy that are very readily available. What we need to do is to get everybody to come to the table and accept the fact that we need to get things sited. You know, right here in Newport, not too long ago, Bill McKibben spoke. He won the Sarah Josepha Hale Award this year. He's a well-known environmentalist activist, and he was asked the question, so every time when we talk about replacing green fossil fuels, we bump into NIMBY. And his point was, we have to stop that. We have to get together and understand that we all must work together to be able to site these alternative sources of energy.
Linda, your chance to
Sure.
address the question as well.
Yes, energy is a problem. Energy needs to be addressed, and the governor has recently released a 10-year projected plan for energy that was a consortium of governors together that came out with basically that we need to have alternative energy sources. And it seems like they're really heading towards solar. And in New London, in that area, there's actually a move to solarize New London area. And it's bringing together, actually Representative Schomburg is kind of spearheading that. They're trying to bring together people who want to solarize their homes, people who are selling solar panels, and trying to get financing. So it all comes together to make it easier so people can get more off the grid. The other side of the issue is efficiencies. And efficiencies are really something that needs to be looked at. If you can make your home much more efficient, you use a lot less energy. If businesses can make their places much more efficient, they use a lot less energy. So I think that we need to look at efficiency. Colby Sawyer has just built a brand new classroom that's using all kinds of new creative ways to be efficient for energy use. So I support RGGI. I think it's a great idea. It's the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It actually takes money and from carbon and CO2 emissions, and then moves that to spur alternative energy and to help subsidize new energy projects. And I think that's the way that we need to go.
Lisa?
This question is for both of you. Thank you both for being our guests. What should the state's minimum wage be and why?
And since you started last time, Linda will let you start this.
Sure. I think, first of all, it's one of my priorities as senator is to work on this minimum wage. It came through my committee, my labor committee that I was working on at the State House. Under the 2010-2012 leadership, the Republican leadership, they actually voted away a minimum wage in New Hampshire, getting rid of our local control and defaulting to the federal minimum wage of $7.25. If Jerry were working at minimum wage, inflation adjusted now from what he was when he first started working, it would now be about $10 an hour. And that's probably a decent minimum wage. However, you can't make that jump. And so my offer is, let's get a minimum wage back. Let's raise it to $8.25 an hour. Let's give people that are struggling at that, you'll hear that it's teenagers or it's people starting in business. It really isn't. The average person on a minimum wage is a woman, probably right around 30, either household dependent for her income or she's a single mother. And to make that amount of money, $7.25 an hour, full-time, you know, she's making well below the poverty level. And poverty is a big issue. So I think by raising it $1, we'll put more money back into the local economy. Those people don't put it in banks, don't send it to the Cayman Islands. They use that money for food and clothing to help their family. So I think it's a major issue, and that's what I'm really pushing.
Jerry?
And now, as Paul Harvey might say, the rest of the story. The $10 minimum wage that's been proposed, according to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, will cost the United States of America 500,000 jobs. It's well known that the minimum wage isn't intended to be a living wage. It's intended to be a starting wage. And it's also well known that that majority of people who make the minimum wage, the woman in her 30s, is working in the service industry. And that more often than not, they are receiving tips that then increase their wage well beyond the minimum wage.
And I'll ask the audience to hold their questions and comments.
The Federal Reserve System has done a study of studies of minimum wage, and 85% of them conclude that the net effect of increasing the minimum wage is to decrease the number of jobs that are available in any economy. So while it does make a very catchy progressive soundbite, it makes very bad public policy, and it makes worse economic policy.
I would say that people would have a very hard time living on that amount of money for a year, making that minimum wage. And as I said, if the minimum wage that you made back in 1970s would be up at $10 an hour right now if it was inflation adjusted. The people that offer minimum wages are not the mom and pops, the small businesses that are the bread and butter of New Hampshire economy. They're the big box stores, they're the large corporations that come in, and we really need to address poverty. Poverty undermines the society, undermines education. A child that comes from an impoverished family is going to have a really tough time through education. We know that.
No doubt about that. We need to address poverty. But removing 1/3 of the minimum wage jobs in the state, leaving no jobs to people, doesn't address that issue whatsoever. Excuse me, let me finish.
Let him have his minute.
Further, when you start to increase the minimum wage, you then put upward pressure on all other jobs in an employer's employee base. So that the minimum wage person who gets bumped up by an hour, then the next person comes along who's been there for 6 months and is no longer being paid minimum wage, but is being paid a higher wage, comes to the business owner and says, gee, they get $1 an hour wage increase, I'd like $1 an hour wage increase too. And the next person comes along and says, I'm really due about $1.50. And then the upward pressure runs right on through the entire organization, and then it hits the front office, where the person who's running the business also has to increase the amount that they pay in employment wage taxes. It ripples right on through. So it's not as simple as saying that we're looking at the 7% of employees in New Hampshire that are being paid minimum wage. It affects all employees and all employers. So as I said, it makes a great soundbite, makes a horrible public policy.
So I'm going to give each candidate 30 more seconds. Linda, with you next, and then we're going to go to another issue. And if we have time, we'll come back.
Sure. I think wage inequality, 75% of the people in New Hampshire support having a minimum wage in New Hampshire that has local control, and also raising the minimum wage. And I think anybody that represents the people out there, where the hard-working people of the state of New Hampshire realize that the minimum wage is an issue, that all this business about all these jobs we're going to lose has never really panned out in whenever the minimum wage has been raised in other states, or even over the course of history. So I think it's like a Chicken Little, the sky is falling, to say that.
So the Federal Reserve System clearly needs to learn from you, Linda, because they disagree entirely. The people who run businesses, who actually make payroll, which I have done for over 2 decades, I understand what this is about. I'm sure you probably don't understand. I don't think you probably ever did have to cut somebody's paycheck, but I have, and it does make a big difference. It's a great soundbite. It's a horrible public policy.
Okay, we're going to continue our questions. Lisa?
As a continuing with that, if minimum wage rising is not a financial issue, what about a moral issue? If you were elected, how would this affect what committees you want to serve on in the state senate?
Do you want to?
I'll start with Jerry and then Linda, please.
So if I understand your question, if the minimum wage is not increased, how will that affect what Senate committees I would like to serve on?
Well, thinking of the issues of poverty and how people will be able to afford their daily expenses.
All right, good. I have said publicly many times that while it might be a big ask, I hope to serve on the Senate Finance Committee, which has the responsibility for crafting, drafting, and passing the next state budget. It's an enormous task. I've watched it being done before, and I know that it is extremely difficult, extremely time-consuming. It takes a lot of listening to all sides, because the process is to take in all of the requests for spending and prioritize them. And so in that role, working on the budget, I would try to work on those types of issues.
My main concern, obviously, is education, because I was a teacher. So I'd like to be involved in that aspect as much as possible. But I also think that, we certainly can work across the aisle with some of the Republicans to see if there's a way that we can address this minimum wage issue, because I really think poverty is a major problem, and wealth disparity is a major problem. And I'm sure, as a bank lobbyist, Jerry, that you don't see the poverty that's out there. I know that they had a program down at the State House where you had to live on food stamps for a week, and not many people took that challenge. But it's really hard out there. It's hard living on the amount of money that people have that are down at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale. And I think we need to address that issue. Certainly the people at the top are doing quite well. And the minimum wage is certainly a modest, $8.25, a modest thing. The money goes right back into the local economy. People who work at places where there are tips, it is very unregulated, and one week they might make a lot, the next week they might not make that much. And their minimum wage is sub the minimum wage. because they are tip-based. So I think it's a big issue. I think it's a moral issue that we need to try to lift people up so that they have the dignity at the end of the month not to be scrounging around for food and clothing for their family.
I'm a lot more than my past titles. I'm a human being. I have family. I have friends. I have a brother who is a part-time teacher who struggles. Don't tell me I don't know poverty. Don't tell me I don't understand it. I'm a Christian. I'm active in my church. I make contributions. I understand what poverty is. Addressing it is extremely important to me, and shame on you for saying that.
I'm going to ask the audience to hold their comments. And yes, please, so we can hear the candidate. Just hold your comments so that we can hear the candidate, so each candidate has a chance to talk and a chance to respond.
What's wrong with that? I'm shocked that she would imply that because would you like to hear what I have to say?
No, not yourself. No.
I'm not insulting anybody. No, I am not. There's no insult intended. I'm frankly shocked that she would say that I don't understand what poverty is, or I have no feelings or concern about people who struggle in poverty. What I said, no, what I said is I am an individual with family, with friends, who goes to church, who contributes, who tries to make a difference. That I worked in the banking industry has nothing to do with whether or not I can be sympathetic and understand what poverty is all about. I do. I've been involved in my community since I became an adult. I contribute. I do a lot of contributions financially, personally, of my time to help people.
I think that being a teacher, for as long as I did, you see through the eyes of your students, you see the community. You see the people at the top, you see the people at the bottom that are struggling. And the minimum wage, to me, is a moral issue. It's an issue where people need to be lifted up to closer to a living wage. Obviously, we can't get to a living wage right now, but for two people that work 40 hours a week, they shouldn't be hardworking people, shouldn't be struggling at the end of that week or at the end of the month to feed their family, to put clothing on their family's back. That is immoral to me. So shame on you.
So let's address the issue of lobbyists.
Why
don't we do that?
We'll wait till a question comes up on that. Gail, if you have a question on lobbyists, this would be a great time. But if not,
Good time, Gail. Why don't you ask me the question?
But I'd like to have you ask the question.
Okay. What I would like to know is because I've been reading up on the minimum wage, and from what I understand.
Change the subject.
No.
John, you probably need to.
Okay.
This is.
All right. Is that the unions want the minimum wage because they have their pay according to the unions. That they set their pay rates according to what the minimum wage is. It has to be so much of a percentage above the minimum wage. So when you raise the minimum wage, it also raises all of the union workers' pay. And I understand that there is some union support for you, so I'm just questioning that, if you could answer that. Sure.
I am a member of the union. I'm a proud member of the NEA New Hampshire. I am a lifelong member. And I have to tell you that in the 35 years that I taught, I never, ever heard anything about the union wages being connected to the minimum wage. The minimum wage is a totally separate issue. Union wages are a different issue as well. But I've never heard them piggyback one on the other like you're suggesting.
Okay,
Well, that gets to the point that I made, is that the motion in the minimum wage puts upward pressure on all wages. It's a simple economic fact that the next person in line says me too, and the next person in line says me too, and the next person after that says me too, and then it gets to the front office, and it all ripples through the employment taxes that have to be paid. It is not as simple as paying that extra buck. It's a lot more expensive than that.
So I'm going to turn this to Lisa, and we go on maybe a different subject.
Okay.
Who knows? We'll come back, though.
Right. I'm wondering where the state can add revenue streams, and would an income tax alleviate the pressure on property tax owners who, by and large, now fund everything in the state? That'll be a question for both of you, too, please.
And Jerry, we'll start with you.
I think any business owner would disagree with you that property tax owners fund everything in the state. The vast majority of the revenues raised by the state of New Hampshire are by our business profits and business enterprise taxes.
Linda?
I think it's the big elephant in the room is revenue streams for the state. I was amazed, as I said, I never had thought that I would be in politics before. So going down there and listening the first year to us hammer out a bipartisan budget and try to refund some of the things that had been taken away by the O'Brien budget, it was amazing to me about the revenue streams, where they were coming from. And certainly in that 2010-2012 period of time, a lot of the monies, like let's say the Chins petition, was then downshifted to the local property taxes, raising the property taxes even more. And one thing about the state is that you have a larger risk pool or a larger pool of people to contribute to even out the burden for people rather than property tax. Property tax is regressive. It isn't a really good indication of your ability to pay. And certainly as people get older, and our state is getting older, it makes it more difficult for people to pay property tax. It's a real burden. So I think that revenue streams have to be something that we need to look at. We certainly need to look at some of the business taxes that are out there, some of the loopholes that are existing that maybe we can close and help bring more revenue in there. There's different areas where priorities have been set in the past. One of the things was they lowered the tax on cigarettes. I don't think that was a tremendously good thing to do, to lose that revenue stream as small as it might have been or as big as it could be. I think we also have to look at dividends and interest taxes. And several years ago, there was a loophole there for trusts. And that took considerable money out. And it's like juggling a shell game, wherever, or whack-a-mole, wherever you push one down, something else is going to pop up until we get some handle on revenue at the state level.
All right, and I'll give each candidate another minute to talk about taxes in general.
Sure. I think you see a clear difference here. I believe that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem in the state of New Hampshire. I don't believe that there are a significant number of loopholes for businesses in the business taxes in the state of New Hampshire. I think you might be confusing things a bit with the federal tax situation, where there's certainly an issue with that, but we don't have loopholes in the BET and the BPT in the state of New Hampshire. They're pretty clear, they're pretty straightforward. We do have research and dividends tax credits and things like that, but those require the business to spend the money first and then apply to see whether or not it has created the jobs that we had expected it to do. So we have some of the highest business tax rates in the nation in the state of New Hampshire, and that's a problem that's going to impede our economic growth and recovery.
And Linda, 1 minute.
Sure. I think the austerity budget of the O'Brien, and this somehow mysterious thing that we're spending too much money all the time and that there's fat in the budget, we have actually gotten to the point in New Hampshire where things have been cut so drastically, where our roads and bridges were so badly damaged that it's going to take, the 10-year plan to really bring things back. You can't keep saying we've got to cut. It's a balance of revenue streams, and it's a balance of looking for efficiencies. And certainly, New Hampshire's had the same problem with businesses doing inversion just like the federal government has. It may be out of state rather than offshore or in Canada, but certainly it's been a loophole that needs to be addressed.
And Gail, we've got time for one last question from this segment, so.
Okay, this is for both of you, but I would like Linda to answer this first. New Hampshire has a problem, like a lot of states, the graying of New Hampshire. And we spend money to educate our children, to give them a good education, and then they go off to college and they never return back here. What do you see as a solution to that problem? That's an investment that taxpayers are making and they aren't getting back.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you said that, Gail, because in canvassing different houses, going around speaking to people on phones. In fact, I called the other night and I said, "This is Linda Tanner, I'm running for Senate District 8, and the fellow that answered the phone said, "I'm sorry, at this house, you're Miss Tanner. And my daughter and son had you for school, and in fact, my son's right here." A lot of students go through school here and then go off because they think there's greener pastures someplace else. But when they want to raise a family, they come back to New Hampshire because they know the quality of life is better here. We're rated #1. They know we have a low unemployment rate here in New Hampshire, and they know that we have a decent education system. So I think people are coming back. We certainly do have a graying problem, as the nation has a graying problem. We're looking at ways to connect colleges and community colleges with businesses and job opportunities to transition people through the education system into the job market, which if they get decent jobs with decent benefits, they will stay here. I think also, I talked to some people up at Hypertherm, and they said, transportation is a major issue here. We need to look at commuter rail. We need to look at transportation so that people can get from where they want to live to where the jobs are. And certainly starting looking at a transportation system up Route 5 so that people in the Claremont, Newport area can then travel up to Lebanon on a bus to go where there are jobs will really help the economy and help people stay here.
We need to start by making higher education more affordable. I've spent over 20 years serving on one of the boards of the New Hampshire Higher Education Assistance Foundation, working on issues about affordability. I championed and chaired a study a couple of years ago to try to figure out why students in New Hampshire graduate with the highest student debt loads in the nation. And it's not a simple problem. And it's not simply that we need to subsidize the university system more. They could use some more money. There's no doubt about that. When we look at the effect of competition on higher education, we find that 85% of the most expensive colleges and universities in the nation are in the Northeast. We have a geographical issue. That is because we've got some of the finest institutions in the country in the Northeast. But that then means that administrators who run our colleges and universities compete not for students and not in a manner that augurs competition towards the benefit of students in tuition costs, but for talent. So we're paying up for professors, for teachers, and that then results in a higher cost of education for students. Furthermore, parents and students are making choices. Unfortunately, the choice that they get to get an affordable education for their students are to send them to the Southwest, to Florida, and to Colorado. When they get there, they see beaches in the winter and they see taller mountains in the winter, and they don't want to come back. The only way that we're going to get them to stay here is to make higher education more affordable. The way we're going to get them back here is better jobs. You get better jobs by dealing with the energy issue that we have in this state. You get better jobs by dealing with the unpredictability of cost of health care in this state. You get better jobs by making the business environment better in this state, and I know about doing that. I've got a strong background in business, finance, insurance, and communications. We can make that work if we work in a bipartisan way.
We are out of time in this segment. When we return after a short break, there'll be a chance for audience questions.